Welcome to the You Can Make a Living in the Music Industry podcast from Nashville, Tennessee. I am your host, John Martin Keith. Celebrities, working class musicians, and people who work behind the scenes in all areas of the music industry will share their stories, encourage you, and give practical advice of ways you can make a living doing what you love in the music industry. This episode is brought to you by Edenbrook Productions. Edenbrook Productions is the company I founded to help musicians grow in their craft. Are you a songwriter, but maybe you've been told your songs aren't quite there yet? Or are your songs ready, but you don't feel stage ready? Or maybe music is your passion, but you feel imprisoned by your day job and you don't know what to do next to make your dream a reality. Well, Edenbrook Productions is here to help. We offer consulting services via phone call, Skype, and FaceTime. And for the You Can Make a Living in the Music Industry podcast listeners, we're offering an introductory 1-hour consultation special. Click on the link in the show notes to contact me, and let's get you making a living in the music industry. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show today. This week I'm talking with my friend John Clinebell of Sync It Music and Licensing Basecamp, which teaches artists and producers to get their songs and production up to standard for sync pitching. John has tons of sync placements including Fox, Disney, ABC, CBS, Starbucks, and many, many more. We are discussing the best ways to approach making music and pitching music in the sync world, plus what genres of music are being asked for currently in the sync world. Please enjoy my conversation with John Clinebell. All right, I am hanging out with my newest friend, John Clinebell. How are you doing, sir?
Doing great.
Thanks for being on the show today.
Yeah, I'm so glad we could make this happen.
I am excited. You just moved to Nashville.
I did.
Yeah, so you've been here, as of this recording, you've been here for how long now, you think?
2 months?
2 months?
Kind of crazy. It's
Awesome.
really gone by quickly.
Yeah, well, welcome to Nashville. And you've been in L.A., out in California for what, about 15 or so years?
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I moved out there back in 2005. Feels like forever ago. And then...
And originally from Illinois, correct?
Yeah. Originally from a little farm outside of Peoria, Illinois. We were on a rural route. Like the mailman knew where on the route to take our mail. We were out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I grew up on for people who don't know it, a rural route. That means you live out in the country and right off of outside of the city limits, kind of a thing. Well, that's cool. Well, thank you for being on the show and for talking with me and my audience. And we love having guests on to talk about what they do in music and to talk about how you got to where you are and doing what you do in music. So you and I met technically originally back, was it 2018, I think, 2017, 2018 or something like that. There was, people have heard me talk about Catch the Moon Music. It was a sync licensing agency out in LA that did this course that would teach artists how to write music for sync, basically. And there was basically our class that went through that course together. And I don't know if you were actually in the class or not, in that particular class with me, but I remember Kathy Heller was talking about you and telling the story of this guy named John Clinebell who was had struggled for a long time at getting a sync placement to land somewhere. And that you've been working at it for a long time, and it just kind of felt like you kept hitting some walls, I guess. And then all of a sudden you landed this Starbucks placement, like an international Starbucks placement, and that just kind of like opened the floodgates for you, right? Is that how that worked? Initially?
The story's a little different than that, but not a lot different. So back in 2015, I decided I was going to be a producer. I stepped away from my office job. I had some savings, and I just decided I went to India for 17 days.
Wow.
Went on a spiritual trek, came back, decided that I wanted to become a music producer, and as I was starting to learn how to do that, like really learn how to do that, I'd always dabbled in it, but as I was starting to learn how to do that for real, it just dawned upon me, I got to find a way to make money doing this too. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was like, well, I was looking for opportunities to make money. I was checking out what people were doing on Craigslist in terms of like posting up ads. I was like, that doesn't seem like that pays very much or anything like that. And then all of a sudden I got this email in my box from this booking agent of a venue that I used to play as a singer-songwriter. But occasionally he would post about different workshops and different opportunities for the community. And back at the time, he was like, you gotta like check this out. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. This lady named Kathy Heller has had like massive success as an independent artist, having her music used by Walmart, McDonald's, and listed off all these companies.
Yeah.
And she's doing a one-time workshop in room 5, the summer of 2015.
Yeah.
And I just said, you know what? I was like, that sounds cool. I'm gonna check it out. Let's see what it's all about. And so I did that, and I really kind of caught the fever right like instantly, in terms of like, this is something that I am excited about doing, because one of the things that she was doing back at the time was like making music that was like up tempo, happy stuff. And it was always like a part of myself that I really wanted to put out there into the world. But I'd always kind of been like the depressed kind of singer songwriter, the guy who's like, you know, not
the tortured soul.
Yeah. I think it was like, you know, I definitely had my Elliott Smith and Jeff Buckley listening years and all that stuff. And for me, it was about like, for the first time, I felt like there was just the happy side of myself could be expressed and do it in like an authentic way. And to see her do that and have success with it, I was like, yes, I want this. So fast forward like another like 6 months or so of me just kind of like dabbling in it. And she started to offer a workshop series. And for about 6 months, we assembled at a little theater that was in Hollywood, and she'd give lectures. She'd bring in a couple music supervisors. For anybody out there who doesn't know who a music supervisor is, they're the person who is tasked with basically the creative and the legal aspects of putting music to the picture, whatever picture they're hired to bring music into. It's their job to do it within the budget that's basically given to them to work with. And sometimes they can fight a little bit for that. But the thing that was really cool that Kathy was doing, she was bringing in these music supervisors, and we would have direct access to them to be able to ask them questions, and we would learn so much about it. So, and then along the way, I started writing more and more and more and more about just these different fun topics and themes that tend to work in licensing. And some of the songs were awful. Some of the songs were really bad. And I think I was just reaching a point creatively where I just felt a little bit like I wasn't sure I was going to make it. And I think so many people out there can probably relate to this. Like, you just feel like you're not enough. You feel like maybe I picked the wrong profession, even though this is something that's just so dear to my heart. It's something that I've always wanted. I moved out to LA in 2005. I didn't have any idea what I was going to do, but I knew I wanted to be in the music industry, and I knew I wasn't going to get anywhere when I was living in Tucson, Arizona doing that. So it was like one of those things where it felt like that was all kind of on the line in a way. And I'll never forget this. It was the end of one of those workshops. I was making all these demos. I felt like they were terrible, but just like doing, writing with like so many different people that I was working with at the time who were also trying to learn the same thing about how to make your music good for licensing purposes. Yeah. And I was like the last in line after one of her lectures. And I waited to talk to her because I just wanted to say to her, I was like, you know what, Kathy, I'm not sure if I can do this. And I think at the time, I think back to it now, and I'm just kind of like, it felt a little like, I hate to say this about like myself, but it felt a little pathetic. I mean, it felt like I was like kind of like looking for validation, but at the time it was like more than anything, what I needed was like somebody to, I think more than anything, after acquiring this knowledge, to say like, and I'll never forget, she's like, you're doing it already. You're going to have success in this. I can see it. And for me to like see that and take that in and really just kind of have an attitude shift around all of this, in conjunction with everything that I was learning and everything that I was really excited about succeeding in, for me to have that type of motivation and belief just kind of mirrored back to me. It was just exactly what I needed to hear at the time. And it really helped me in order to feel the feelings that I needed to in order to keep at it. And I just kept at it, kept writing, kept working with producers, learning from people. And not long after that, I had a very good set of 4 or 5 songs that I started pitching around to different rep agencies. And not too long after that, I had a couple of offers for rep deals. And the way it all happened, it was so fast. Actually, the very first placement I ever got was the Starbucks ad. And it's kind of crazy. It was like it ran for like 2/3 of a year. It was nuts. Like, it was everywhere. It was a worldwide ad. I was driving driving out to visit my sister in Arizona, and pulled over at some truck stop and went to go get a soda in the truck stop, and I'm filling up a soda and I hear my song, like, and I'm like, what, wait, what's going on? And I look, there's, they have those TVs that are just kind of randomly playing something. Yep. I'm like, that's me. Yeah. And then at that point, Marty, it really hit me. And it was kind of an emotional moment for me. I was almost like crying in this truck stop. This
awesome.
Because it was like, you realize, wow, this is no joke. Like literally millions of people are hearing me sing. Yeah. And that was like kind of in a way the whole point of me moving to LA was to move the needle that way, to take these messages, and the messages that I was singing in that song were like meaningful to me. Yeah. Even if they were like an upbeat kind of happy thing. And even it felt a little saccharine. It's like that side of me was being expressed and people were taking it in, and it was just like a very cool thing. It's just the start of it for me too.
Yeah.
So
that's fun. I love that. You're in a truck stop and you're hearing that see it on a TV, hear it. And like you said, millions of people are hearing you sing all of a sudden, but then all of a sudden you're also at the same time surrounded by all these strangers who have no clue that is you they're listening to right at that very moment. It's like, it's interesting Is a dichotomy? Is that the right word? I don't know. It's an interesting situation to be in.
It's like anonymous fame in a way. Yeah. Sometimes with some placements it's anonymous fame. Sometimes the placements lead to like a lot of streams, or just like you get a high profile placement in a TV show, all of a sudden your artist numbers really start to climb.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk more about that in the future. Let's back up a little bit and tell us again where you're from in Illinois. Yep. What got you into music to begin with, and what kind of led you to the path of going from Illinois to LA to get you going into music to start off?
It's a long story. Do we have like a couple hours here? We'll see.
We can.
No, but it's not that long of a story. But I grew up in a musical family.
Okay.
My dad and his uncles were known as the Clinebell brothers in Stark County, Illinois, the little tiny county that I grew up in, about 35 miles northwest of Peoria. We were outside of a town of 1,600 people called Wyoming, Illinois. And on that farmhouse that we grew up in was filled with music. My dad had a little project studio in there. He was a folk troubadour. It's how he actually met my mom, was on the road. He was traveling around in the 70s in a VW bus playing taverns for the door, and she met him while he was touring around in a little town in southwest Colorado. So, that's cool. But we ended up, they ended up deciding to start a family, and we ended up living on this farm that my grandfather owned, and we're kind of stewards of the farm. And we didn't actually go out and plant the crops and anything like that, but we were like taking care of it and we'd feed the cattle and all that stuff. So it was this really interesting mixture of farm life and just being around beautiful nature all the time and creativity. My parents were super creative. My dad was he was a troubadour, songwriter, played a lot of, all of his favorite acts. He knew like 300 or 400 covers of different folk artists, all the classics. And so he would be playing guitar and recording. He had a little 4-track recorder. I remember that. And he would record his own demos and send them to Nashville. And I remember the rejection letters. Later on in life as an adult, I ended up finding a stack of rejection letters that he would get from these major Nashville publishers. Wow. And that was kind of like an emotional thing for me to see, because it was like he really did want to succeed.
Really tried it,
in music, but I feel like it was tough for him because he was working a full-time job as a teacher. He was an amazing school teacher. Everybody loved him. And, but yeah, he was like stuck in between two worlds. It felt like it was happening for him creatively. But my household that I grew up in, it was full of creativity, fun. They'd have like these house concerts where my parents would invite some friends over who knew how to play a banjo or knew how to play an upright bass, and just like there'd be music going on until 1 or 2 in the morning, and that was just kind of how it worked. And growing up around that, I got a real appreciation for harmonies. That's one of the things that I soaked up like a sponge when I was a kid, and I just kind of knew. I was listening to records and listening to like one of my favorite records of all time is Paul Simon's Graceland, and that record, I just listened to it over and over and over again. And I started getting interested in like the production of it and the songwriting of it. And I think that maybe that album I could probably accredit some of my interest in learning how to produce. And it's like, how did this whole thing come together? I would imagine about like, well, where did this, because you read on the liner notes, these people in Africa, and like, where did this musician come from and this musician, and how did they get them all into the same room and get it all working? And it was fascinating to me to think about it, even though that wasn't really thinking about like, I'm going to become the producer. But even at an early age, I was geeking out on music and really reading the liner notes and taking a little more interest than maybe some people would. And then, as it ended up happening, when I went to college, I really didn't do anything with music until I went to college, and, formally, but, knew I could sing. I'd always been in like grade school choirs and things like that. But it wasn't until later on in life that, when I went to college, that I was like, you know what, maybe I could learn to play guitar. I know I can sing. And I'd always like kind of loved to sing along with some of my favorite records. But I never really thought that I could write my own music necessarily. But I thought, well, why not? Why don't I just go to some open mics or something? And for me, it just all started with I wanted to learn a couple cover songs. And then once I realized I could teach myself how to play some chords, then it kind of, it all kind of accelerated from there. I ended up finding a guitar player who was like way better than I was, and we made a band. It's what happens a lot of times, right? So that's kind of like the story of how I get from there to LA is just like a few years. I ended up, that band, we had a lot of fun. It was like 5 of us. We were all super talented. We were all totally on different pages in terms of like what we were trying to accomplish as a band. And so it was like kind of probably your typical college band experience. Had a lot of great times, a lot of great shows. Started to work through some of my stage fright issues, because I had a lot of stage fright when I was first starting out. I was just super shy when I was a kid. And so ended up doing a lot of work on that through the band. And where this goes from here, I ended up moving to LA. When did I move? In 2005. And by that time, I had maybe spent a couple of years dabbling in because I was learning how to like play the chords while I was singing. And it took time for me to like get that all lined up, because I was always used to being like the guy who just sang the lead vocal, right?
Yeah.
So for me to get a little bit more confidence around like my rhythm playing and do all that, it took me a couple of years. And then I just realized that with all the open mics and different gigs that you could play in Tucson, it just kind of felt like it wasn't going to be a place that anything really was going to happen for me. So I don't know why. I think back and I cannot remember the moment where I just realized that I wanted to go to LA, or even why I wanted to move to LA. I think I just kind of knew in my bones that that's just one of the places people go when they are talented in music in any kind of way and they want to get better at it.
Sure.
So for me, I think I just made the decision I was gonna do it, and I was not gonna be denied. And it's kind of crazy. Like I tried moving here one time, had in a 2-week period everything I owned stolen out of a storage unit, had gotten almost like a super violent situation.
To move to Nashville?
Moved to LA.
Oh, to LA, okay.
Yeah, the first time I tried moving to LA,
yeah.
It was crazy. I had everything I owned stolen out of a storage unit, had almost got in a crazy car accident on the 10 freeway. We're doing like 540 in traffic. And it was a miracle that we didn't flip or like end up crashing into any other cars. There was an office chair right in the middle of the freeway. It was going like 70 miles an hour. It was nuts. I don't know how we didn't flip there, but I'm grateful for it. And then my girlfriend at the time, she got jumped in the San Pedro Public Library by a gang. Oh my gosh. And this all happened in a 2-week period. And it was enough for me to like at the moment say like, all right, I'm good. But then like a year or so later, I was just like, you know what? This is what I really want to do. And a friend of mine was moving out there. I was like, do you know any neighborhoods that are safe in LA that we could move to? And so I just took the plunge and did it. And, it was one of the best decisions I ever made, I think. And I think for me, like looking back, it was one of those moments where I was like, if there's things that you really want in life, how badly do you really want them? Are you willing to go to any lengths to get it?
Yeah.
And I feel like there have been a couple of times in my life where I could have just completely given up on whatever it was I thought could happen for me. And I'm really glad that I didn't do that.
Yeah. So once you finally got to LA,
yep.
What were you pursuing at that moment? How were you starting to make connections once you got to LA to do music?
Oh man, it was interesting. Back then, my mentality around everything was so different. I think back then I didn't really know what I was doing. If I'm totally honest, I had no idea what I was doing. I was a singer-songwriter. I was going out and playing the open mics that are the cool open mics and trying to figure out like, well, who's booking this show and who's booking that show and who are the cool producers that I might be able to work with. And I think I thought about it a little too much, like, is there somebody I need to know to get ahead, or is there I was trying in so many different directions. The whole time I was working a full-time job, which you have to, like, if you don't, I didn't have any other way. I didn't have a bunch of money saved up or anything like that. So I had to pay Los Angeles rent, which is very pricey, even back when I first moved there. So for me, it was a culture shock as well, because to go from a town where like the biggest traffic jam you ever see is like 20 or 30 minutes to like, I mean, literally I was living in a place where my job was like 2.5 miles away, and it would take me an hour and a half to get to work sometimes. Wow. I could have walked there faster, and I should have. I would go back in time and tell myself, get a pair of shoes on and get like some athletic shoes or something like that. Get a walk in or something. Would have been like a lot less stressful. But so a lot of it was a culture shock for me. A lot of it was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just gonna do and do and do. And I got ripped off a couple times. One producer just straight up ripped me off. I mean, it was like, overcharged me for services that like he really he didn't do a very good job of. But I was like, I think that's part of the price you pay when you are first getting into something. And I've always had like an open heart and tried to have an open mind with working with people. So I think I got fleeced a couple of times early on in my LA years. And it was frustrating. Honestly, it's difficult when I didn't really know anybody out there, and I was trying to get people to come out to my show. And then it all dawned upon me, well, I should probably just move to where the show is. I should just move to the 3rd Street Promenade and start performing out there, start doing street performing. So that's what I did. And that was like probably the first move for me that really moved the needle in terms of my career, because that move to the Promenade did so much for my professional career. It actually like completely ironed out all the rest of the stage fright issues that I had. Because the cool thing about 3rd Street Promenade, I don't know if you've been out there, but
no, explain what that is and what you're doing out there.
Yeah. So 3rd Street Promenade is it's a area of Santa Monica, California. It's right by the beach. Nowadays, it more and more just kind of feels like an outdoor mall, but it was a little more funky when I first moved there. And it was just a place where there was shopping, and there was like a constant stream of people just walking up and down it, going to different stores.
Is that the place that's always in the movies? Like someone's always skating up and down, and out there throwing frisbees.
It's
and all
world
that
famous.
Okay.
World famous. Yeah, that or Venice Beach. Venice Beach is another place where you see that. Or maybe more frisbees down on Venice Beach.
Okay,
but
I got you.
You can also busk on Venice Beach. I never really did that. I just lived like right off the promenade, and I would take my stuff out, and you had to get a permit, and you had to show up early and all that stuff. Yep, to busk, and it was a really great experience because I mean I was so stubborn back then too. I was so willful in my ways because I was not going to play covers. Yeah. I was only going to play my original material, and I was the only person who was doing that. Like everybody else, I mean, I don't begrudge them at all. Back then I was like kind of annoyed with them because like I would be out here playing my own, what I felt at the time were like good original songs. They really weren't. They weren't good songs. I wasn't a good songwriter back then, but I had probably a higher opinion of my own work than I did, and I probably need to be humbled a bit. And I think that's part of this whole process, was a little bit of a humbling for me. And it's also just like how much do you want to fight against the stream for me? Because I was fighting against the stream every step of the way in a way, because I'd be going out there and watching them play the same 5 or 6 covers and do a really great job of it, be entertaining and have like huge crowds surrounding them and things like that. And it's like, well, I've got to be original. I've got to do things differently. I got to do things my way. My way is not like copying what everybody else did. So I think I had like, back then I also had kind of this like sense of superiority to other people that is just like not at all what I'm about nowadays. It was just kind of like, I felt like those were the things that were tough for me to navigate in the middle of like still feeling like, you know, LA is this big crazy city and working a day job and, you know, trying to find a healthy relationship out there. It's just, it's a lot to do. But regardless, I would go out there and street perform, and there was a 2 or 3 year period where I would go out there 2 or 3 times a week, sometimes more than that. And it was like just such a great way for me to work through it, because I ended up realizing that like I could just play my music and people can have their own opinion of what it is, and it doesn't have to affect me personally. I think there was like this personal, I almost took it as a personal affront when people wouldn't like stop and, check out my stuff for a little while. But I realized there's different shades to that. And everybody's like got their own thing. Like some people, they just, they show they appreciate your music by just kind of bobbing their head and like giving you a little bit of a smile as they're walking by. That doesn't mean they don't like your music. Maybe they've got to go check out like a movie or something like that. Yeah. Or, but then it's like, well, what was I hitting them with? I was hitting them with my original stuff that wasn't that well written. And they hear somebody down the street that's playing like the biggest hit of the day and they're, want to go check that out. So I think it's interesting. My perspective on that looking back, it's like I see some of the mistakes I made, but I wouldn't change a thing about like how it all unfolded.
Yeah. Well, I would agree with that. I would say that, because I would be like you. I'm out doing my original music. I'm not doing covers. I didn't I record covers now for sync stuff, but that's different. As far as going out and playing concerts, when I was 16 and first starting to write my own music, I was doing my music and covers of certain artists that I liked that fit in my genre of what I was doing, because they were people I looked up to and I loved their songs, and it fit in that same thing. But the older I got, as I got into like college age and things like that, I didn't prefer to do covers. I want to, I'm trying to be an artist. I'm trying to be a songwriter. And so what do? You go out and you write your songs and you perform your songs. So you don't see the artists that when a new artist comes out, that you like and you're like, oh, I like that song, I'm going to check them out. You don't hear them doing a bunch of covers of other people's stuff, because they're trying to create their own music for you to connect with.
Exactly.
And to sell their albums of their music that they're trying to create a fan base, out of us. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a fan base of our music, so I agree with you. And I understand you having to learn different things and kind of hit a wall and get frustrated that so-and-so down here is doing a really great cover while you're doing an original. But I would prefer, if I'm walking by, because there are people here in Nashville that busk all the time, especially down in Franklin where I live. And if I'm out walking downtown Franklin with my family and there's a guy that's busking, I want to hear him playing his own music over a cover song. I'm like, I hear the cover, I hear that song all the time on the radio.
Yeah. And you just go to Broadway for that.
Right. Yeah. It's like, but I want to, if you're going to sit here and play on the street and I'm going to listen to you, let me hear what you do. To me, I prefer that as well. So I don't think you're wrong in doing those things by any means, but I understand the frustration of, having to learn all that stuff as you go. So let me ask you this. Once you had done that for a while, like how long did it take you to go from busking to realizing that you wanted to get into the sync music world?
Yeah. So the segue for that was I ended up taking a job at a mall company, actually. It's kind of a weird seg, but I ended up taking a job at a mall company, and it was a really good paying job. And I had, since I'd moved to LA, worked a series of jobs that all paid pretty well. I always had a tech background, so I was an IT guy. It was the first job I had out of college. So fortunately, I've always had a skill set that could work in the corporate environment. And it was one of those things where I accepted a job that paid great. I had no issues. I moved to a place. I moved further away from the promenade, and I just got into a zone with things where I really stepped away from music almost altogether. And it was in a way, a very unfulfilling period of my life, because I felt like it was almost like there was a part of me that was not being used at all. And not that I was like ignoring that it existed, but I guess I kind of was, and I remember too, the job that I was doing, it was a job that I felt like I did this for a couple years. And at the end of those couple years, I just kind of felt like the work was not what I was put on this earth to do. I wasn't put on this earth to help teenage girls find fashion accessories And especially if those fashion accessories are being advertised by somebody who looks like they're super anorexic. And it's just like there's some stuff that like started to morally not vibe with me in terms of that environment. That in connection with what am I doing here? Like I moved out to LA to pursue a music career, and I'm not doing anything at all related to music, and I haven't done anything for music for like a couple of years now. So it all started with me dabbling. I started dabbling again in music projects, and I made a really, really good friend, an Italian guy named Alessio Miraglia, and we ended up writing a bunch of songs together. It was just so fun to get together with somebody and write music again. So for me, that was like one of the things, was just like starting to work on any music project again. And then once that happened, I just realized, you know what? I have been putting this off for too long. And I realized that it took another leap of faith for me. And the main leap of faith was that I was going to be okay if I just completely quit my day job. If I said, I am not going back to a corporate office for the rest of my life, and just made that decision. And so I just made that decision one day, and I put in my 30 days notice. Like I said earlier, I went to India for 17 days and came back with some insights, some spiritual insights, and it just became clear to me that the way in which I was going to proceed in the music industry was to learn how to produce and how to do it well, and obviously level up everything else that I'm doing alongside that, but like really having production be like the focal point for me. And that once I started that, that's how I ended up getting into the idea of doing licensing, and then that just became my whole world for quite some time. And in a way, it still is my whole world. And I teach about it all the time. Yeah.
So what are the steps once you decided, okay, this is what I'm going to do?
Yep.
How do you go about pursuing that for you specifically in LA?
Boy, for me, I did have to, there's practical realities of things. I did have some savings lined up and ready to, because there wasn't going to be a situation where like I wasn't in a place where I knew I wouldn't be able to get enough clients to make my rent. It was ridiculous. I didn't even know how a compressor worked back then. Yeah. So for me, I had to have a little bit of a buffer in order to make the transition. So that was one of the things that was really, it gave me a little bit of a safety net. It wasn't like an unlimited safety net or anything like that. I just, it was what I had in savings, and I made some investments. I feel for me, like the keys for me to make that transition from learning to earning, it was about actually learning the practical skills necessary. I went to a producing academy, Create Academy, it was run in Westlake Studios complex in West Hollywood, one of the most famous recording studios in the history of the world. And that's where I learned went to a boot camp of sorts, really in-depth boot camp. First week on songwriting completely blew my mind. I realized that there were things about songwriting that I didn't know for 18 years. And just like from a basic level, after that week, I kind of understood why the songs that I was writing, why they weren't working. So for me, once I got to a certain level of understanding with some of the things that I had always struggled with, especially on the songwriting side, then it actually got really fun, because it's like, okay, I have these great ideas. I know these ideas are good now. Now let's see how we can get that to what I'm hearing in my head. Can we make that happen on the screen? Can we make that happen coming out of the speakers? And then it becomes like this fun challenge. And it took a while to get there, but that was like, and then just starting to collaborate with as many people as I could were really the keys, because that is what all led to me starting to get the big checks with the sync licensing. It's what led to me starting to get paying clients that paid well. And it's what led to me eventually starting to teach about licensing.
Yeah. So once you started doing all of those things, that's when you met Kathy.
Exactly.
Correct. So she was your first introduction into the sync world. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay.
First intro. I had a placement back in 2011, but it was like I didn't get paid anything. No master sync on that or anything like that. I was in an end credits of an indie movie.
Okay.
But yeah, the first really understanding anything about the process at all, or what they're looking for, any of that stuff, it was all Kathy Heller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, so now let's talk about what you are doing. So you've recently moved to Nashville, and I know you had started a new company.
Yep.
Shortly before you moved to Nashville. But so tell us what you're doing now, and name your company and what you do with all that.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy. I think back to everything that's happened these last 2 months. I actually started the company with Sonnet Simmons, one of my colleagues and a good friend of mine in the music licensing world. She's had a lot of success in licensing, as I have. And we were both teaching for Catch the Moon. And all of a sudden we realized that they were making the decision that they didn't want to continue the ongoing monthly support for students that had learned how to do licensing in Catch the Moon. So what Sonnet and I decided to do, and it was kind of one of those decisions that we did it, and then like the next day we were like working on putting it all together because we realized it was like a no-brainer, was just how can we keep the momentum of this going and how can we build it and then own it and really just do all the things that whatever we want to do with it and really like be owners of that company. So we started Sync It Music. That's SYNC itmusic.com. You can go there to check out information about that. But what we do is we have a community called Licensing Basecamp, and the point of that is like if you're thinking about placements as like, oh, you're constantly on the climb, you're constantly making music. It's a cycle. You get into a place where you get your music up to commercial standards from a writing perspective, from a production perspective. Then you go out, you pitch the music, and you complete the cycle all over again. So how can we be the Sherpas? How can we be the guides to help you reach the peak and then come back down, tell your stories amongst the Basecamp members? And it's an analogy for music licensing and kind of the cyclical nature of music licensing and the mentality that I've found success with and Sonnet's found success with. And we found so many people have found success with this to just do and do and do and get your music out there. And we wanted to create a community that embodies all the things that we were teaching at Catch the Moon in terms of like providing a lot of encouragement, a lot of accountability, and just continued strategies for success with different workshops and things that people, guest experts we can bring in, and licensing opportunities as well. So we've created this community and it's off to a great start. We're having a really fun time doing it. And that's what Sync It is.
So what if someone is interested in learning more about it, they go to the website.
Yep.
Right? Syncit.com.
Yep.
Correct?
Sync It Music.
Syncitmusic.com. And then if they want to, how much does it cost to be a member?
Yeah, it's a $29 a month membership, and as a part of that membership, you get 4 live calls with us every month. So we will do every first week of the month, we do what's called Music Licensing Mastermind, where we go over latest, we kind of, it's a rotating subjects thing. The first one that we did was about trends for 2022. This month we did one that was about songwriting and just some of the perspectives that we bring in, how important songwriting is to licensing and some of the things that are like the most important things to do. We have a discussion with the people in the group, and it was really nice. We do these hot seats as well, where we put people in the hot seat for 5 minutes and really give them an opportunity to tell us what they're struggling with, and then we try to provide like insights and solutions and give them encouragement and give them an idea of like something they might be able to try to kind of get unstuck with things.
Okay.
And so that's just one of the calls, but we do 4 live calls a month. We bring in a guest expert, and they are the licensing partner for the month, and our licensing partners sign songs from these listening sessions we do with them, and it's been really great so far.
Okay, so that's good to know. So when you have a guest,
yep,
licensing agent comes on as your guest,
yep,
and then they listen to the songs of the people that are in your group,
yep.
And while they're listening, if they like the song, they think, I can pitch that song, they're going to sign it. They've got the opportunity to sign it. They don't have to. Obviously.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened the last time.
That's the hope, is that they'll sign it.
We give them an assignment at the beginning of the month that's given to us by the licensing partner. Okay. So, and when we're talking about licensing partners, we're talking about mainly rep agencies or pitch people. So pitch people that are looking for specific types of songs, rep agencies that are looking for kinds of music to rep either non-exclusively or exclusively. And it's a good opportunity for people to get representation, which is really like, I feel like that's one of the fundamentals of doing well in music licensing, is to get representation that believes in you.
All right. So here's the question. You ready?
Yeah.
You're in the hot seat right now.
Let's bring it.
Exclusive or non-exclusive?
I feel like that's it. No, it's a really good question. I used to have this attitude. It was only like when I really first started. I was like, oh, exclusive? That seems like scary. But then the first rep deal that I ever signed was an exclusive deal, and they got me in 2 months. They got me a Starbucks ad.
Yeah.
So it's like I feel like it doesn't matter whether it's exclusive or non-exclusive. What really matters is how much they like your music and how much they're really going to go to bat for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's way more important.
Right, having someone that's going to be actually willing to pitch your music regardless because they believe in what you're doing.
Yep. And then one thing to consider with non-exclusive, it's less commitment. It's less commitment on your part, but it's also less commitment on their part.
Right.
So it's a less, I'm not going to say it's a less sturdy deal, but it feels like to me, it's just it doesn't cement it as much. And you also have to, as a content creator, as a music creator, you have to be careful how many agencies or people that you give the music to non-exclusively, because the possibility is out there that if you have this great song and it's in like 3 different agencies non-exclusively, they might be pitching to the same opportunity, and the person who's deciding what songs to use, they're looking like, well, who represents this song? I like the song, but it's confusing to me.
Yeah.
And if there's anything that I would say that I've learned in this, in terms of like, what you don't want to introduce into situations, it's confusion.
Right.
You don't want to, because you want to be really solid with these are the rights holders of the song. Just be really clear and upfront with everything. If it's like confusing who reps your music, then I'm sure people have lost deals because of that.
Sure. And I know that's been a huge conversation over the years between lots of us living in that reality of, I've got music exclusively licensed to certain reps. I've got non-exclusive deals. And so I've got the same song in 2 or 3 different places.
Yeah.
When I first started out, I did the Big Bad No-No, and it had the same song probably in 7 or 8 different places at once.
That's maybe a little excessive.
It's a little excessive.
Maybe.
It's a little overboard. But realizing that, I ended up pulling it out of most of those and went back down to the 2 or 3. I tried to not go more than 3 ever anymore.
Yeah.
Usually maybe 2. But like, can you honestly say from experience, if you know, or if you know someone who's done this, like how often, I understand, it's a big no-no. You want to be careful that you're not having 3 or so companies pitching the same song to the same music supervisor, because that supervisor doesn't know which one to choose. And so therefore he won't choose it at all.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't know
who
to pick. So, but how often have you actually experienced that? Or do you know of people that have... how often does that actually happen?
You don't experience it, I think, because if it happens to you, they never tell you. You know what I mean? It's like it never really gets back to you if they decide not to use a song because it's repped by a couple of places. I've never had it happen where 2 people, I'm sure this happens. It's just never happened to me.
Okay.
Where like there's 2 companies and they're kind of duking it out.
But I mean, have you heard of other people that have gone through that though?
I've heard of it. And I don't remember specific cases, but I've heard of it happening.
Yeah.
And here's the thing to note is that it's less about, sure, there's definitely going to be, if you have 2 companies that are repping different interests in the song, which company's going to take the lead. There's always a little politics behind the scenes with that kind of stuff. But the one thing the one thing I would say about this is like, once a music supervisor, there are some music supervisors that if they feel like there's anything whatsoever funny about the way that you do business, I don't know if they have like a blacklist out there or anything like that, but I know there's some music supervisors that are very serious about this. And if they ever see it, they're just like, I'm going to remember that name and I'm not going to work with them in the future because I can't take the risk of, having to navigate the situation when I'm busy, like with so many things, and I don't have time for it. It just strikes them as unprofessional, and I think some of them take it more personally, while other music supervisors are a little more understanding of that perspective. That it's like, what are the chances that if you have 2 or 3 people repping your stuff, it's probably not going to happen that often, and that's what I've come to kind of intuit with this, is that it's okay to have like a couple people non-exclusively repping your stuff, because chances are it's not going to happen. And do you want to miss out on the additional opportunities that having two people rep your stuff could be better than just having one person rep it.
Yeah. And I think the reason that most people are willing to do non-exclusive, to have a couple people rep, because I think these companies, for the most part, have different focus. Mm-hmm. You know, like one company is pitching to certain styles or certain types of TV shows.
Sure.
And then the other sync agency is pitching to different types of things. So your song can be in two different places because they know that it's going to different opportunities that are not going to overlap and cause that situation, hopefully.
Yeah, and there's research that you can do to kind of suss that out a little bit too.
Yeah.
You know, it's just follow their Instagram channels, see what they're announcing about placements of artists that are on their roster, and you can sometimes figure out, oh wait, they're both placing songs on this MTV show. I probably shouldn't have both of them repping this song that would work perfectly in an MTV show.
Right, yeah. Okay, so 2022.
Yeah.
Now, podcast material is evergreen material. This stuff will be listened to hopefully for years and years to come.
Sure.
Which is fantastic. But knowing that we're recording this in 2022 when this comes out, with you and Sonnet and your company and teaching artists about licensing and things like that, you were saying about some of the trends of 2022. Are you allowed to tell us a little bit of what some trends you're seeing are in sync licensing for this year, so people know listening that are into this kind of thing?
Yeah,
they can have some ideas of what to be doing.
Of course, yeah. Well, you know, some of the stuff that we're seeing in terms of like it's really been a continuation of the last 6 months. There's been a lot of like weird, quirky, high energy, hip hop influenced, basically like pop, indie rock. Stuff with like positive messaging, great hooks. And just a little bit of soul and weirdness to it. I feel like that's really like what is working right now in the ad space, is just a lot of just how is your song different, and is it different in like a soulful kind of fun way? We feel like that's one of the keys in terms of like what's happening in 22, and more and more and more. I feel like this is just it keeps. At first, it felt like it was kind of like more a peripheral thing, but now it's more and more the case that I feel like most agencies and most supervisors really want to support actual artists. So the more that you can make this cool music that works for licensing, but also, this is the trick, have it something that is also totally in alignment with you as an artist brand, I feel like that's you're going to really put your best foot forward. Because even if they can see that the needle is moving a little bit with your artist brand, there are so many supervisors that want to support independent artists and really help them to get a bigger exposure. Versus like if your song is just something that's it's like a no-name brand, it's like a moniker that you make up because you put like an EP together, and there's no actual artist support from it. There's no photography, there's no branding, there's no videos, there's no effort put into making it an actual artist project. I just feel more and more and more that's where things are trending. Real artists, real music, but also you say real music, but it's music that has to work in, you know, for example, if you're targeting ads, it's music that has to work in the ad space. If it's music that is more targeting reality TV, then it's going to need things like we brought on this last month for a workshop. We brought in this amazing video editor. He also owns a licensing company called Atrium Music. Josh Young showed how like important it is, for example, for the endings of your songs to have this nice tail to them, because it is what works really great in reality TV. You want to make sure that, you know, that whole idea of like just having a super abrupt ending where everything kind of goes,
sting ending,
you know,
or cold decay,
not as good, not as helpful. What he's looking for a lot of the times, and he will request, is an alt ending that's like it more rings out and has like a tone to it. Helps carry things through.
Not a fade, not like the song is fading out. You hear the lyrics and getting quieter and quieter, but you hit the last chord and let that chord just ring.
Exactly.
Keep going.
Versus just like ending on a percussive hit.
Yeah.
really abruptly,
which
has been like something it's cool and fun to do. And if that your artist project, you want to do that with your artist project, that's cool. But it would be really smart if you are trying to get your music onto one of these reality TV shows and the agency that you're working with is doing that. It would probably be a smart idea for you to custom tailor the music a little bit so that it is really going to give you the maximum chance. And you're not going to have them hit you back and say, hey, can you do an alt ending?
Yeah.
So, it's like, I feel like those are the main things that I'm getting for 22. It's always changing. We're constantly getting new briefs and we're constantly hearing new music and seeing new placements all the time. So I think that's the other way is to just, I feel like for 22 is if you aren't already following where things are happening, where the action is, you're really not going to be on the pulse of what's happening.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's where like being connected in some way, whether it's through Sync It, Licensing Basecamp, or anywhere else you can get it. Clubhouse has a couple of great rooms. For example, Control Camp is a great place that you can go to get information on music licensing and what's happening. And they do listening sessions as well. So it's like wherever you get it out on YouTube somewhere, find it somewhere, get on those trends, and just like that's where if there's something out there that you like and you think is cool, then chances are there's a possibility that you might be able to do something similar. Actually, that was like my initial thought when I was listening to these ad songs, these ad-friendly songs. I'm like, I could do that. Mm-hmm. It's just like, where is it? Where's the place in the licensing space where it just feels right to you to say like, I'd like to try doing that. So yeah. I think that's the things that I would say to anybody who's out there thinking about either jumping into licensing in 22 or they just want to continue to hone their, what's happening right now with the trends.
Yeah, that's great, man. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing all the information. As we wrap up, normally at this point, I'm usually asking, hey, what's some advice that you would give for good stuff? Well, that was a really great amount right there. So the flip side is that what are some things that you recommend people not do? Like, what are some things to avoid?
Oh man, this is a pretty long list. I think we'll see. No, but I think the things, is it in terms of licensing or just in the music industry in general?
Either and or both.
I think we'll talk about, because I think this is something that applies to the music industry, but it really does apply to licensing as well. Is just being very. You just got to be polite to the people that you want to work with.
Okay.
You got to be polite, and it's one thing to not have the courage to reach out to people. You have to, squeaky wheel gets the grease, you have to be willing to ask for what you want in the world, but there's a way of going about it. And I see all too often the way that people go about this is kind of putting the cart before the horse. They have a song, they think it's good for licensing, and they immediately try to find some way to get a hold of the music supervisor for a show and just directly send them the music without any introduction. I've even heard of horror stories where people somehow acquire like the phone number of a music supervisor and call them up. Mm-hmm. There's a horror story from one person that was sharing about how they were just at a backyard barbecue on a Sunday and they get this call, and then they work with people all the time where it's like they need short turnarounds on stuff, and he's like, he doesn't know, picks it up and is like, realizes that he's getting pitched music from an independent artist that somehow found his number. Oh, man. And it's just like, you can't do that. Yeah. You can't do that. It's one thing to understand, especially about the licensing community, and this, it's like it's a relatively small community in the larger tent of the music industry.
Right. Yeah.
You have probably somewhere between 300 and 450 main music supervisors, and they are a very close-knit community. If you get in bad with one of them, it's only a matter of time before word gets around. So I would say it's important to get, if you really want to get your music into the hands of somebody important, to go through the proper channels. And if you do want to try to pitch somebody directly with something, that's totally cool. It's never been my style of doing things. I always rather work with somebody who already has the relationship with these people, and it's not like I'm trying to forge something completely new. It's a way easier for me to have rep agencies that are good, that pitch my music. And so that's how I choose to do that. But you even need to be careful with this as well, because you just have to remember the person who's receiving your email is a human being. They are not somebody, nobody likes to be spammed. Nobody likes to be solicited to. And I would say over everything, nobody likes to be told how to do their job, which I think the tone of a lot of people when they reach out to people in the music industry is that I have this music that's perfect for what you're looking for.
Right.
And there's an arrogance with that that I think is not lost on a lot of the recipients.
Yeah. Anytime you say my music is perfect for something, that's usually a red flag for most supervisors.
It's like, how do you know even what I'm working on? And are you saying you can do your job better than me? Mm-hmm. It's not a good look. Yeah. It's not a good look. So the ways to but there are ways to engage people. Most music supervisors who have an Instagram account do not care if you follow them. They don't care if you comment. And in fact, they're humans too. They like to make new friends. They like to go to conferences and shake hands and, all this stuff. They like to do the Zoom things and check out the chat. And yeah, sometimes they'll even just throw out, hey, here's my email address. Send me some music. I want to hear some stuff. Maybe they feel like they want to listen to some new stuff from indie artists. And that happens all the time. There's so many opportunities like that. But I just think that if you do want to advance in the music industry, you just have to remember not to put the cart before the horse. That's a huge thing. It's going to potentially, especially in a small community like the music licensing community, you could say some things that you end up regretting later on, especially if you do the dreaded question mark reply after they didn't respond to your message for a couple of days.
Yeah.
It's just this, it's how entitled are you?
Yeah. Well, yes, I understand that. We as artists that are wanting to get our music out there, a lot of times we feel like maybe they didn't get the message.
Yeah.
Maybe it went to their junk folder or spam folder, and because that does happen.
It does.
Those things happen.
Yeah.
And so it's okay, well, and because I run into that, that's something that I have to fight. Not necessarily with music supervisors. I've learned, you just gotta put it out there, very kindly, quickly, politely, and then move on.
Yep.
And then hopefully they'll get back to you. If they don't, then you just keep going.
Yeah. I never learned to never take this stuff personally.
Yeah. But there are other things like when I'm booking something or I'm trying to contact someone for a thing, and then I realize they haven't responded in 3 weeks to a month. Chances are that email probably went to a junk folder or spam folder. So then it's figuring out how do you email them again, and in a polite way and say, hey, I emailed you a few weeks ago. It probably went to the junk folder because it's got a link in it. A lot of times when there's a link in an email, that'll send it to a junk or spam folder.
Yeah.
So it's finding a way to kind of reintroduce yourself, without coming across arrogant or overbearing, and just say, hey, because a lot of times they'll be like, oh yeah, I never, oh wait, there it is. It's in my junk folder. Sure is.
Totally. I mean, there's some people I run a zero inbox, and there are so many people that are not that way at all. I mean, they literally
keep it clean.
It gets lost constantly. And I just think the key is if you're going to reach back out to somebody is just don't have any assumptions when you reach out. I think as long as you have that rule, you're going to be fine because you can just say hey, you can almost pretend the first email doesn't even exist sometimes too. And it's fine, Yeah. But I think it's if there's people that you have, once you establish a connection with somebody, if they don't respond to you in the future, it could just be because the latest song you sent to them didn't do it for them, or they just were having a bad week. And,
Well, one of the things I love about working with licensing agents as a rep, as opposed to going, now I've done both. I've been able to go directly to music supervisors in some cases because I've built friendships with certain people. And so I've got that freedom to do that now, which, but that's, again, you're building a relationship. It takes time to get their permission to do that kind of stuff. But I've been able to do that. But then most of the time I go through a licensing agent. And once you connect with that licensing agent, in my experience, you start building a friendship with them, and you send them music, and they, man, I love this. This is great. Keep sending me stuff. And then you can reach out to them on a pretty regular basis, and and without the worry or concern of, I don't know if they're going to like this, or I don't know if I'm bothering them, because you write for them. You're writing for this company, and they're expecting stuff from you. So there's a little different perspective there, I think, going through a licensing agent as opposed to trying to go directly to a music supervisor. Would you agree with that?
I would agree. Yeah.
Awesome. Dude, this has been great. I appreciate all this information. This is really good stuff for people to hear that are trying to get into music licensing, sync licensing music. So if you guys are listening, then definitely take all this information to heart, because this guy's doing it. He lives it and he teaches it, and he knows, he's got the inner circle on some of these companies that you're working with. So definitely take this stuff to heart with what you're trying to do. And thank you, John, for being on the show, and we're so grateful that we finally get to connect in person and be together, and look forward to writing together and seeing what we can come up with, and hopefully we can land some stuff together.
Yes,
That'd be
let's
awesome.
do it. Let's do it. I so appreciate your hospitality here, and it's so great to be on the podcast. I appreciate it, man.
Well, I appreciate it. You have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, you too.
See ya. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to my conversation with John Clinebell today. I really, really hope you enjoyed it. So, as we talked about in the episode, John and I technically officially met a few years ago through this company called Catch the Moon Music, and we both sort of went through that program to learn how to write music for sync. And so that was really, really very beneficial, very helpful for me and for a lot of the people that have come up with me through that company, learning how to do all this stuff. If you're wanting to work in sync licensing and having your music on TV or film projects and things like that, Catch the Moon is not doing that particular type of thing any longer, but John's company, Sync It Music, is doing that. So I really want to encourage you, if that's something that you're interested in learning more about, please go check out his website at syncitmusic, SYNCIT music.com. And I would love for you guys to check that out. Hopefully he can help you out and get you going in the sync world. Please let me know how that's going for you guys. I really want to hear about that. Please subscribe to the podcast if you have not. Whatever platform you're listening to it on, please subscribe. Let your friends know about it. Remember, Edenbrook Productions is here to help if you need consulting services via phone call, Skype, Zoom, or FaceTime. Be sure to let us know how we can help you begin to make a living in the music industry.